the Sonia Sotomayor prompt. It is in the 2022 free response questions rhetorical analysis. Born in New York City to Puerto Rican parents, Sonia Sotomayor was appointed a U.S. Supreme Court Justice in 2009, becoming the first Latina justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. She delivered a speech, A Latina Judge's Voice, at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law in 2001 when she was an appeals court judge. The following passage is an excerpt from that speech. Read the passage carefully, then write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical choices Sotomayor makes to convey her message about her identity. Here's the prompt. This is what our thesis is going to be about. Oops, that's not it. The message that Sonia Sotomayor has to say about her identity. What's the message there? That's what our thesis is going to be about. What is the message? So let's get into that prompt. This essay should respond to the prompt with a thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices, select and use evidence to support a line of reasoning, explain how the evidence supports a line of reasoning, demonstrate an understanding of the rhetorical situation, and use appropriate grammar and punctuation in communicating your argument. So her excerpt starts off with, who am I? I am a New York Rican. For those of you on the West Coast who do not know what that term means, I'm a born and bred New Yorker of Puerto Rican-born parents who came to the States during World War II. So in my planning guide, one of the things I have space analyzed up here, and I'm not sure what her main message is about her identity, so I'm just going to kind of leave that blank. She starts it off with a rhetorical question, and she makes up a term, New York Rican, which to me means that she is dual identities. She's a New Yorker and a Puerto Rican. Not one is more important than the other. She has coined this new term for herself, explaining how she feels about her identity. Like many other immigrants to this great land, my parents came because of poverty and to attempt to find a secure a better life for themselves and the family that they hoped to have. They largely succeeded. For that, my brother and I are very grateful. The story of that success is what made me and what makes me the Latina that I am. The Latina side of my identity was forged and closely nurtured by my family through our shared experiences and traditions. For me, a very special part of my being Latina is mucho platos de arroz, grandules y pernil, rice and beans and pork, that I have eaten at countless family holidays and special events. My Latina identity also includes, because of my particularly adventurous taste buds, morcilla, pig intestines, patitas de cuerdo con garbanzo, pig's feet with beans, and la lengua y orejas de cuchifrito, pig's tongue and ears. I bet the Mexican Americans in this room are thinking that Puerto Ricans have unusual food tastes. Some of us, like me, do. Part of my Latina identity is the sound of the merengue at all of our family parties and the heart-wrenching Spanish love songs that we enjoy. It is the memory of Saturday afternoon at the movies with my aunt and cousins watching Cantinflas, who is not Puerto Rican, but who is an icon Spanish comedian on par with Abbott and Costello of my generation. My Latina soul was nourished as I visited and played at my grandmother's house with my cousins and extended family. They were my friends when I grew up. Being a Latina child was watching adults playing dominoes on Saturday night, and us kids playing loteria, bingo, with my grandmother calling out the numbers, which we marked on our cards with chickpeas. Okay, let's pause there because I see a shift. There's another rhetorical question. Now, does any of these things make me a Latina? So I'm going to go back to our planning sheet here. I think her tone is nostalgic, pleasant, explanatory, appeals. So far, I think there's pathos in those family memories, trying to urge the audience to also relate with a pleasant childhood experience. Let's continue here. Now, does any of these one of these things make me a Latina? Obviously not, because each of our Caribbean and Latin American communities has their own unique food and different traditions at the holidays. I only learned about tacos in college from my Mexican American roommate. Being a Latina in America does not mean speaking Spanish. I happen to speak it fairly well, but my brother, only 3 years younger, like too many of us educated here, barely speaks it. Most of us born and bred here speak it very poorly. So going back to our choices, I'm going to go with logic here. And it surprises the audience that this Latina doesn't know what tacos are. Because logically speaking, locos, we would assume that anyone of Latin descent eats the same things. However, that is my white perception or lens that I have about Latin American people, specifically Puerto Ricans. She goes on and lists exactly what she eats. Rice and beans and pork, pig's feet with beans, pig's tongue and ears. All of these are things that Mexican Americans would say, what? But as a Puerto Rican, that's very normal. So going back to my planning, I'm going to go, it surprises the audience that this Latina doesn't know about tacos, but rather eats many different parts of the pig. All right. If I had pursued my career in my undergraduate history major, I would likely provide you with a very academic description of what being a Latino or Latina means. For example, I could define Latinos as those peoples and cultures populated or colonized by Spain, who maintained or adopted Spanish or Spanish Creole as their language of communication. You can tell that I have been very well educated. That antiseptic description, however, does not really explain the appeal of morcilla, pig intestine, to an American-born child. It does not provide an adequate explanation of why individuals like us, many of whom are born in this completely different American culture, still identify so strongly with those communities in which our parents were born and raised. So I am starting to see what this main idea is about the thesis. The message is about her identity. I think what she's saying is identity is a feeling, not a description. And I might even use her word antiseptic, which means like germ killing. America has a deeply confused image of itself that is in perpetual tension. We are a nation that takes pride in our ethnic diversity, recognizing its importance in shaping our society and in adding richness to its existence. Yet we simultaneously insist that we can and must function and live in a race and colorblind way that ignores these very differences that in other contexts we laud. That tension between the melting pot and the salad bowl, a recently popular metaphor used to describe New York's diversity, is being hotly debated today in national discussions of affirmative action. So I want more information about this metaphor that she just talked about, this tension. So this footnote here, indicates to me that if I go to the footnotes, it's going to describe that idea more. So the melting pot and the salad bowl is a contrast, respectively, between a homogeneous society, which means the same, where distinctive cultural identities merge into one cultural identity, and a heterogeneous society, which means different, where distinctive cultural identities mingle with one another without losing their distinctiveness. So I'm going to go back to our planning sheet here, and I'm going to put that under choices. She uses that metaphor. She criticizes that metaphor, actually, of the salad bowl and the melting pot. With the salad bowl, everything is still separate. You got the lettuce separate from the cheese, separate from the boiled egg, separate from the dressing. Although it is living together and we eat it all together at one time, it's not necessarily one food item. Whereas when you melt something together, there is that chemical component where it unifies and becomes one. When I melt butter and I mix sugar into it, I can no longer separate the butter and the sugar compounds because there was a chemical reaction that happened there. But I could, if I really wanted to, separate out the parts of the salad bowl. So how unified are they if I can separate them? That might be an interesting metaphor to talk about in my rhetorical analysis essay. Many of us struggle with this tension and attempt to maintain and promote our cultural and ethnic identities in a society that is often ambivalent about how to deal with its differences. In this time of great debate, we must remember that it is not political struggles that create a Latino or Latina identity. I became a Latina by the way I love and by the way I live my life. My family showed me by their example how wonderful and vibrant life is and how wonderful and magical it is to have a Latina soul. They taught me to love being a Puerto Ricana and to love America and value its lesson that great things could be achieved if one works hard for it. So if I go back to my planning guide here, we have a couple choices, appeals, and tones noted. However, I'm going to send you this example too that we went over in class of an essay that got a 6. And I want us to basically use her or their essay thesis as our own to get us a start. This essay thesis is, however, in light of debates between a homogeneous versus heterogeneous society in regards to cultural identities, Sotomayor argues that these identities aren't and shouldn't be black and white by sharing her narratives and experiences with this conflict. So you can either use that thesis, or you can use the one that we've been developing here about identity is a feeling, not an antiseptic description. You can use either of those as your guiding lighthouse in what you want the rest of your essay to be about. The body paragraphs are going to be about choices, appeals, and tone, and you are going to explain the impact on the audience and the impact on the meaning. So again, I'm going to send you this example of an essay that got a 6 out of 6. The first paragraph talks about that coin term that she uses, New York Rican. It also talks about the examples of that she gave about her family and what they eat and what they do together to bond with their cultural identity. The second paragraph that this writer elaborates on is talking about the differences in the different types of Latinos that there are, specifically the Puerto Rican Latinos and the Mexican American Latinos, and how a lot of people group their identity together as one. However, she doesn't feel Mexican American. She feels Puerto Rican because of the way that she was raised. Specifically, misconception is a great word that this young writer uses to explain the differences that are reinforced in that cultural identity. Finally, she transitions into her third body paragraph where she talks about that antiseptic description. I would say the rhetorical device here that this person uses is definition, which is kind of a hard rhetorical choice to analyze. But this writer does a really fine job of that. The writer is trying to define identity, define Spanish American versus Mexican American versus Puerto Rican American, and what those differences are. So the main idea of Sonia Sotomayor's excerpt is identity cannot be defined, it has to be felt. So, hopefully this helped you. There's this planning guide here where it provide the relevant historical context or knowledge. This is where space is going to live. The speaker, who the audience is, the context, the exigence, all of that is planned out already for us right here. We did this in class. So I'm just going to copy and paste that and put it in the planner. If you put all of this into a couple of sentences, that'll do for your introduction. Basically, you could say something like, Sonia Sotomayor was the first Latina Supreme Court Justice. She identifies as a New Yorker and as a Puerto Rican, as both of her parents are Puerto Rican, yet she lives in the States. She wrote this excerpt to Explain her identity and her culture as a Latina, in which there is not one definition for. She wrote this for UC Berkeley law students as a person of color. It was very important and impactful as a female to stand up before her peers and give this political message. Then your thesis is going to be about what is her definition of identity. The main idea number 1 is the writer, Sonia Sotomayor, relies on metaphors in order to explain her definition of identity. How is she doing it? She compares the melting pot versus the salad bowl in order to describe the different perceptions of identity in America. Then you're going to give me the quote. After that, you're going to dive into the deeper meaning and the effect on the audience. Hopefully this helped. I'm going to send you the planning guide. I'm going to send you the excellent essay example. Let me know and email me if you need anything else.